All right, excited. Sitting down with Phoebe. Phoebe, what's up?
Yo,
Yo, and Kara. Kara, what's up?
hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good. I don't have my glasses on me today. I think they're by my bedside, and I wear those for like up close encounters, So I mean, it's not too blurry, but like I last time I was at the doctor, the eye doctor, they're like throwing all those. You guys are young. You haven't had this experience yet. They're like putting all these letters, and I'm like,
Yeah.
can I get a clue? Like maybe phone a friend? Like that, is that a letter or a shape,
Oh no.
So no, I'm stoked to be sitting down with you guys. Here we go. We try to do this every month. Little team banter and connection. Wrap up last month, introduce the new month. What's going on? Anything we should talk about? We've been talking about mental health.
Yeah.
And I personally was like a kid in a candy store. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I've missed my calling. I should be a counselor. It was so much fun. It was so much fun. Like talking about mental health. I was like, this is epic. I love this
Yeah.
stuff.
Your face
How was
is
it for you guys?
lighting up in all the interviews. Just like, yeah, so intrigued.
Who was?
You in the interview.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, very interested. I mean, Phoebe and I have this experience together where we've read. I finally finished The Choice by Dr. Edith Eger. So we've been on that road reading that book together. She read it last summer, but I'm always talking to her about Dr. Eger's book.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're kind of on this. I'm on this journey of discovery around mental health and yeah, I guess it's a little bit of journey into psychology land and counseling land too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've been stirred. It's been really interesting, really fun, really eye-opening for me. I feel like I'm gaining tools and skills. How are the interviews for you guys? Anything you want to bring up that felt like a standout moment or?
Mm. I think with Dr. Margaret, I loved when she was talking about the breakdown of like psychology and what is the study of psychology when we're talking about mental health. And it's basically soul health. I like found that a way more like helpful way for me to think about mental health. Because otherwise it is literally just like the mind.
Yeah,
And she was like, no, it's not the mind, it's like your soul, like your mind and your will and your emotions and the way that they all work together, and it's like wrapped up in your identity, and it's just much more of a kind of wholesome picture of mental health than
yeah,
like,
like total well-being,
yeah,
right? Like total well-being, a human's well-being. I know, like mental
yeah,
health makes it sound like it's this narrow little path, but we're talking about people thriving, right?
yeah,
That was good. And she also made that sweet point about like how everything in science speaks back to faith and basically God's order, like the way God has created things to function. And she was speaking about like she feels like she's kind of a bridge between like maybe classic psychology and what we would call, I don't know, like spiritual health.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's like super vital because like there's been a lot of religious ideas that fight against the natural kind of state of humanity. And you can see where those come from because there's an essence in religion of like that would agree with that idea, but not in a twisted way. And
Yeah.
so definitely I think it's like super cool like to be in that bridge space of like understanding truth in all of life, and whether that's like how your soul functions, like how God created it to be.
Good. Yeah, I think that's probably what I was lighting up about is like just as I'm reading this book by Edith Eger, talking to these professionals, just how natural the like therapy counseling exchange really should be. And honestly, like talking to some of these really learned people who've studied psychology and are sitting with clients day in and day out. And like really, I'm looking at them as like healers. They're like really walking people into freedom and wholeness. Yeah, I just don't see that divide or that bridge. I just see it as all very connected, but they've got a lot of tools. like some really good insights, practical insights. I think sometimes in the church or in like a spiritual context, yeah, maybe we over spiritualize things and don't give people like practical tools. And so I just felt like there was a lot of good nuggets that they were passing out.
Mhm.
And I like that one thought. I wonder if it's like a dictionary definition, honestly, of mental health. When they were, and it was repeated more than once, they talked about integrity between,
Yeah.
between your values and what you're feeling or experiencing in life.
Yeah.
And I am fascinated by that. As a pastor, as a leader in the church, I think so often there's like a lack of integrity between what people believe and what they're actually experiencing. You know what I mean? And we sometimes sweep it under the carpet and just say, well, I'm going to pray more, or I just need to. There's a lot of like, well, I just need to. And yet what they were saying as professionals, like, no, mental health is like that. Like you can bring alignment with yourself and there's a way. It's not just about you putting in the work. There's also probably some healing that needs to take place. And I thought that was fascinating. I don't know. Anything else stand out to you guys?
Well, just to that point, I think it's fascinating. It also gives you a lot of hope, you know? That's one thing that in the interview with Jill Percy Clark, she was talking about like a lot of people when coming up to this issue, they don't even, they just feel like hopeless, like I couldn't change. I think, initially has to be an awareness of like, oh, things could be more optimal. Like I could be functioning differently, but then there's also like the hopeless piece. So what you just said is like pretty profound of like giving people, oh, this actually is meant to be a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, it feels like another set of tools that they're passing out. And again, in my reading, I'm like, I just finished a pretty deep dive into some of Carl Jung's writing. Right. It's like definitely one of the fathers of modern psychology. And yeah, so again, a lot of tools, a lot of like stories, his testimonies. I'm like, wow, there's like healing coming from these guys. Dr. Edith Eger, like real healing. Margaret, real healing. So yeah, I don't know. I'm interested, fascinated. Feels like some goodies.
Yeah.
Some goodies.
Integrity as well. Like I've only ever thought of it or heard it talked about as like a character trait. I would have never connected it to like your emotions and your mind and the way that you're functioning like all together. Never.
Yeah.
Like that's very insightful. And it helps you understand more of like where integrity like truly comes from rather than like forcing it or like trying to become an integral person. Like no, it's more to do with what's going on in here.
Yeah, and like the honest assessment of what's really going on, and having the courage to face things where there's deficiencies, right? I liked in the interview with Doug Phillips the kind of simple bottom line he was drawing to community and vulnerability. Like as you're in community, as you're open with your journey with others, you have much greater access to that integrity that they were speaking about, or fullness. Like we're referring to like thriving. Basically, mental health is like the whole person thriving. And he spent a lot of time on that, didn't he? Like just the blood of Jesus doesn't really cleanse unless there's an openness and a confession. Like here's where I'm at. I think sometimes we would always just use that verse for sin. But I felt like what we were talking about when I was interviewing him was broader than sin. It was just more like your life journey, like being open with others and having others in your journey, and being open with your life. And I definitely heard that theme through the interviews. Like when you're isolating or keeping things to yourself, you're probably less likely to be thriving. Yeah. So good stuff. Nuggets. Margaret, I will say, I do see her, like she's my go-to in a counseling setting or therapeutic context. And wow, she's really helpful. She gives out some really good tools. So I've been enjoying my times with her. I also talked to Jill about that, Shepard, Piercy Clark, what they offer at Dunamis, like very accessible.
Yeah.
easy to connect if people feel like maybe they're just to the point of like, dude, I need input. And I think we get there in life, don't we? It's like we get to certain spaces where it's like, I need input and it doesn't matter what it's going to cost me. Like I got to sit with somebody.
Mhm.
But then to Doug's point, well, you could just maybe even just sitting with community is enough.
Yeah.
Sure, a part of the piece of the puzzle. Yeah.
I liked when you were talking about like being with a therapist kind of teaches you how to be vulnerable with people. And it's probably a safer and easier place to do that. So it's almost like you need both parts. Like maybe you need a therapist to help you be vulnerable, but then actually like your kind of breakthrough in that would look like being vulnerable with my community because I've learned how to do that with a therapist. So it's like both hand.
That's great. That's really good insight, Phoebe. Yeah, I have the pleasure of that relationship with several people. You know, they wouldn't call me their therapist by any means, but they definitely come towards me with, you know, an openness about their journey. And I recognize in that exchange something very, very sacred. I don't know why you're laughing right now. I was making-
You're like,
I wasn't talking about you guys specifically. What the point I was making is that like I recognize a very sacred exchange in those settings and something that I do think, you know, like there's a skill you can build there as a listener, as somebody that's going to feed back in appropriate ways. And that's where I think like, hey, community is amazing, but it may not be enough. Like sometimes you need a different kind of relationship that you can go to, that whether it's a voice of authority or somebody that's further down the road than you, whatever. But I do recognize there's like something sacred there when I say sacred, I guess what I mean is like something that's healing, something that like there's power there, that transformational presence. Yeah. So, well, I'm gonna keep going on that journey. I'm gonna definitely get the next Edith Eger book. I'm gonna be reading more into this. We encourage you guys that are a part of our audience. You guys are finding our stuff, our content, like give us feedback. Let us know what struck you. If there's anything that really felt like something you wanted to talk about, like we're paying attention to our social media feeds, our YouTube channel. And I think we should use that as a segue. We're actually going into a new campaign. Do you want to talk about that? So we're turning on an engagement campaign. Is that what do we call it that? What were we?
Yeah. Yeah. Engagement campaign.
Okay.
Yeah. Where we just want to. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
No, I want you to talk about it, please.
Okay. Yeah, we want
you to engage.
yes. So we're launching a campaign, the
With
Engage
us.
campaign. Yeah, we're basically going to launch a campaign where we just want to facilitate more interaction between us and you as the audience, and like find out what you're kind of receiving from Justice Collective and from the interviews and like past discussions that have happened, and what else, like other things you'd like to see more about, hear more about, any testimonies that you've experienced from like, oh, I listened to this discussion and this part really stuck with me, like anything. Yeah, and we're gonna launch some hashtags with that, like Justice Collective Action and Justice Collective Stories. We just want to like gather people's stories together and be this kind of online community where we're going after justice together and hear from each other in that. So it's like two-way.
I love it. Yeah. And I love what you said. And beyond like stories that have impacted you from our content, also just stories from your own journeys, like ways that your eyes are opening to justice, ways that you're engaging in justice initiatives in your community. So and that really tags into our next month. We're gonna actually put the spotlight over this theme, this idea called what is justice. So partly what we've seen in our own justice journey, especially for me as a leader in the church, is that justice is a very polarizing term. The stuff that we do here in our environment in Reading, so often, like I mean, more times than I can relay, we get people that are engaging with us, whether they take part in an event we're running, whether they bump into our stuff online, whether they show up in a class that we're facilitating, and they always come away with this line like, oh, I never saw myself as a justice person. And so they had an idea of what a justice person was,
Yeah.
and they immediately, like, they just removed themselves from that landscape. And so defining justice feels like a very important piece of our mission.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a broken record. I say this all the time, but we just say the gospel is justice, in that Jesus rights wrongs on the earth. And our aim is that Justice Collective would actually be a collective, like a network of global family of people that are engaged in justice on some way, and whatever that looks like. If that's mentoring youth, if that's working with the homeless, if that's leading a church, if that's running businesses, we just think it's really broad.
Yeah.
So hashtag Justice Collective Stories is share your stories with us.
Yeah.
Hashtag Justice Collective Action, share the action that you're engaged in, like stuff that you're doing in your locale, in your city. And we want it to be bigger than Reading or Bethel Church, because we know justice is much bigger than Bethel Church. And we are excited about that whole process of people's eyes opening. And we love the exchange. I don't know. I'm looking forward to more exchange.
Yeah.
So how about for you guys? Like when I say what is justice, what comes to mind? And maybe that's even connected to like you're doing an internship with us right now,
Yeah.
your third year students. Maybe there's been some revelation, or maybe it's like, oh no, what I thought justice was, it is, I'm doing it.
Mm.
Well,
Anything there, Kara?
yeah, well, I think like, to me, the whole idea is very much, is loaded with a lot of questions, and you see a lot of, especially the like religious ideas that are like very much juxtaposed to doing justice, in a sense of like, yeah, so I think I'm excited about this month's theme, seeing some of those questions answered.
Yeah.
I know for me, like, I always had this idea of like, you evangelize everyone, and as people are getting transformed by God, then society naturally just falls into order. And I think there's a few problems with that, like not everyone immediately responds to God
Yeah.
when they hear the message. And so there's like a bigger experience of like bringing the gospel to places besides just verbally articulating the gospel, but an experience of it.
That's good.
But honestly, my main thing I was going to say is like, I'm really excited to see some of the religious objections to justice, like the myths debunked.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's a crazy thought right there. Like, okay, well, so everybody gets saved, then obviously everything will change in the world. And yet, I mean, I don't know. It's like how many Christians, how many people that have found Jesus are like moving into dark places of their community to bring hope and solution and light. Not that because I do justice, I have all the answers.
right.
But I just think justice is the byproduct of Jesus changing us. Like we naturally go out and are a part of transformation. Christians can go about that in ways that are not helpful and not transformational. But the big point I'm making is like, there's a lot of Christians in every city of America, but there's still a lot of problems. So I think we've got some work to do. I think there's things for us to learn. That is not me nailing the church or being mad at the church. It's just like, hey, no, let's bridge the gap. And boy, I want to bridge the gap more. I want to do a better job of bridging the gap myself. Phoebe, what do you want to say on this? I've said a lot.
Yeah, like currently level of understanding of what justice is that I'm like, oh wow, justice is way broader than I thought it was.
Okay, boom. That's a big point. I'm like, oh, there you go. I like that.
Yeah.
Why? What did you think it was? Like, how is it broad? In what sense? Like what it used to be what, and now it's what?
I think justice, I'm like, I can see it kind of, well, growing up in a country where justice is often spoken about in the legal system, like if you're
Okay.
bringing justice, you're bringing kind of legal action.
Yeah,
I don't know if I would have heard justice being talked about in like the space of healing
yeah,
or like
sure.
counseling or therapy. I'm like,
Yeah, so
justice?
it's more punitive. It's more about like people being incarcerated and like
Yeah,
consequences for negative actions. That's justice.
yeah, that's justice. And I think even just seeing like being part of what Justice Collective is doing, I'm like, oh, like mentoring like youth in schools. I'm like, I didn't see like that being a part of the year, but I'm like, oh wow, like justice. Just like different, I think there are many different ways of expressions of justice that like my eyes are being open to. And I'm like, oh wow, I love all of them. And I love seeing them through the lens of like, oh wow, that's justice being brought to the earth.
Yeah,
Like, wouldn't have seen it as that before.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Restoration, like,
exactly.
yeah, people thriving.
Yeah.
Where are there people not thriving in our communities? Justice looks like, okay, hope, investment, some sort of investment that brings shift and brings people up, causes people to, rise to that surface of thriving and the abundant life. So,
Mhm.
and yeah, maybe that includes incarceration and holding people accountable for bad choices, but I just don't think it's just that. I think there's a lot to it. And yeah, excited to dive in. I think there's a lot to do there, a lot to talk about. And in the middle of that, hopefully that increases this engagement campaign also, like we're hearing more of the stories from others, people that we're not currently connected to, that we
Yeah.
want to, yeah, we feel like this is like a big family. It's much bigger than our little work. So excited to hear from you guys. Um, I usually try to leave like a word, and we'll see how this comes out. I just finished Dr. Edith Eger's book, The Choice, and she finishes with basically some golden nuggets at the end of her book. The Choice is her memoir. She's a survivor of Auschwitz and a doctor, a therapist, a counselor, psychologist. I think she's in her early 90s or maybe 90s, still alive. Her practice is down in La Jolla, California, San Diego area. Probably one of the best books I've ever read. Maybe that's just because the season of life I'm in. I just was impacted, every page, rocked. Wish I could quote her stuff verbatim. But she had this to say at the end, and she's talking about basically thriving. She's talking about people thriving, and she has these 4 questions that she asks people when she's meeting with them. 1, what do you want? And she says, this is a deceptively simple question. It can be much more difficult than we realize to give ourselves permission to know and listen to ourselves, to align ourselves with our desires. How often we answer this question, what do I want, when we're actually answering in the context of what we think someone else actually wants for us. So stopping and taking personal stock. Again, I'm wrapping up mental health right now. This is my kind of summary word, is get in touch with your desires, be familiar with what it is that moves you. And this is all like an exit strategy to get out of blame and victimhood type living. So basically living connected to other people's idea for you. And then this big idea, who wants it? Again, it's back to, you want it, or is it that other people want it for you? And you have to live a life that is yours to live. So who wants it? You have to determine, is this your desire or someone else's desire? And giving up the need to please others is probably a big piece of the puzzle for mental health or thriving. And then the last 2 elements are more about action. So what are you going to do about it? So recognizing when there's something you want that you're feeling is worth pursuing, it's probably going to take risk. And it may not be the easiest thing for you to pursue what is valuable to you. So she mentions that the power of positive thinking is real, but she says at the end of the day, the actions that you take will define your experience of life. So here's her line: change is about noticing what's no longer working and stepping out of the familiar, imprisoning patterns of your existence. So take risk, be strong enough to move towards what you say you want. And then lastly, she asked them when. So, very, very coaching oriented type of questions, but like, there's always tomorrow probably isn't going to work too well for you. Like when should be a little bit more like today or now. So those 4 questions, I feel like we're like just kind of nuggets for health and wellness. And so I'm not necessarily giving you a word. I'm just echoing another word from somebody whose writings are influencing me heavily right now. And I personally am like, okay, I'm inspired to do that. Like, what do I want? Who is it that wants it? Okay, when am I going to take be willing to take action or take risk and actually put a timeline on that? Like, when will I do something about this? And I recognize within that, sometimes we think we're ready to take action on things and we may not be ready. And so there is a process of giving yourself grace, not to allow yourself to stay in abusive situations, but maybe you're looking at a career change, maybe you're looking at, I don't know, something relationally that needs to be adjusted. There is some timing to when like taking action is real for some of us. And yeah, I want to finish with that. Like, I think that's the goal, that we're all thriving, we're all living our best lives. I do think mental health, the alignment of the integrity between how we feel inside and how we're experiencing life is, there's complexities there. There's a lot to it. I was watching a video from Jordan Peterson last night, and he said something profound. He said, actually, like mental health is as simple as your circadian rhythms. And he was talking about, do you have a routine? He literally was like, if you have a routine, I guarantee you'll have more mental health and wellness because you are caught up in things that you need to be caught up in versus, not keeping commitments or overcommitting or, whatever. I'm like, that's a really good thought on mental health, wellness. All right, Justice Collective, get involved. The world is run by those who show up. Justice is broader than one thing. I like that. Excited to jump into what is justice here in the next month. And you'll be looking for some interviews. We're going to be interviewing, I've noticed on our docket, we've got some church leaders. We've got a social worker. We've got people from kind of various realms. So excited to get into that with y'all. And make sure you jump into our engagement campaign. Look for our posts on Instagram. That's where we're going to be kicking that off. And Phoebe, thank you. Always a pleasure. Kara, thank you. Always a pleasure.
Welcome.
Thankfully, I get to see you guys all the time. It's not it's a monthly interview. You guys are awesome. Any parting words, or we'll just say adios?
Adios. Yeah.
Adios. Okay, see you guys. We'll see you soon.
Bye.